We're excited today to be able to talk with our friends Russ May and Emily Norris about our neighbors who are experiencing homelessness right now and talk a little bit about that. I want to introduce Emily Norris first. Reverend Emily Norris is ordained in the Evangelical Lutheran Church of America, the ELCA. But she is currently the pastor of The Dwelling, which is a church for folks who are experiencing homelessness. And it is also something that's a partnership between the ELCA and the Moravian Church. So I want Emily to talk a little bit about that. But then we also have Reverend Russ May with us from Anthony's Plot, who is also a board member for City with Dwelling. And I understand Emily you're on the staff of City with Dwelling, correct? Yeah.
Yep,
So there's a lot of, but the dwelling is different from City with
it
Dwelling.
is. Yep.
And so if Emily, if you just want to take a little time to tell us about the dwelling and what it
Yeah.
is, and how just a little history on that would be
Yeah,
great.
absolutely. So the dwelling truly was born out of the work that we'd started with City with Dwellings, which City with Dwellings forms because Russ May is a Moravian pastor and in partnership with the Southern Province and fiscal agents and all the things, right? So there's a lot of connection there. But I ran the Augsburg shelter site. And so I really just fell in love with this population and this work. And through my time running that shelter site, I just heard so clearly that this community, our folks that are experiencing homelessness, have this deep and profound faith. And yet, so many of them didn't have a church home. There are so many downtown churches that say that they are welcoming, and they are welcoming. They're not exclusionary. They're kind when folks walk in, but our population to even walk through the doors has to check a piece of their identity. Right? They automatically don't fit. They're not going to ever be leaders of Augsburg Lutheran. They're never going to be leaders of Centenary. They're always guests to them. And so I just heard, like, over 7 years of investment of shared life, that there was just this desire to have a faith community that looked like our population. And so I had just this really incredible access to hearing those stories and that desire. So as I started my process towards ordination and really dreaming about what God was doing in my life and what this call that was being stirred in my heart, um, I asked our synod bishop and our director of mission and said, I think that God has actually already formed this church. We just need to shepherd it. And, with a lot of mission development, mission starts, you spend the first 2 years in that discernment and that listening to your population. And before you even launch in a public way, and we had already done that work. We already had this really profound yes within the population, the people we were hoping to gather. So it was really easy. But my bishop, he said, I am not saying yes to this unless it is partnered. He said that's the way of the church, and we cannot start churches anymore that are not partnered with other denominations or organizations, which also then made the dwelling a really natural and easy yes, because not only were the Moravians interested in being at the table at this, but also being partnered with City with Dwellings. We are separate, we are different things, but we share the same heartbeat, we share the same population, and by default, now we share the same space. So for being a mission church, we don't have the overhead of buildings and utilities and all of that, because City with Dwellings has gifted us that space right now. So our mission director, her name is Danielle Denise, and our bishop, Tim Smith, started the conversation with the Southern Province about what it would look like to federate. And federation is just this legal term, I guess, of that the church is both. So we are fully Lutheran, fully Moravian. There are other Lutheran and Moravian partnerships within our synods and our provinces, but this is the first and only of its kind that from the onset is fully both. So it's not that we're just sharing clergy, or that we're the Lutheran church and the Moravian church existing in this thing, shared whatever, but like we are both of those things by our incorporation documents. So it's pretty exciting because we are new all the way around. Yeah, so that's kind of how we got started, and it's been interesting and not quite what I had imagined because of COVID. It's definitely changed the game a little bit and shifted some of the ways that we are figuring out how to exist, but it's also been really, really faithful in that. So,
Great. And it is so exciting to have a true partnership, and we'll see what comes. I mean, I think hopefully as we return to some sort of, I don't know, normalcy seems like not the right word exactly, but as the pandemic begins to fade away, as we certainly hope it will any time now, but it'll be interesting to see what happens with
yeah,
the dwelling, and that's very exciting.
yeah.
Well, Russ, do you want to tell us a little bit about sort of city with dwellings and what's going on there and what's going on sort of with the state of homelessness right now, given the pandemic? And of course, right now it's getting worse, not better.
Yeah, and I'll still throw this back to Emily, who's on the ground over there too,
Sure.
and she's got some good stories to share. But I think what's interesting as I was listening to Emily talk, it reminds me, and another kind of shared experience that Emily and I have is kind of the brothers and sisters of our faith communities that exist in Tanzania in particular. And um, one of the things that I was mindful of back in a few years ago, I don't remember when I was over there, was how the way we frame things in terms of poverty in kind of a Western culture and impoverishment and things like that. And it's a very simplistic and even dismissive way of thinking about people in that lens. So these are poor people or impoverished communities. And I say that because it kind of does two different things. And this relates to one thing that Emily, I think, is hitting on. It relates to how we think someone's not capable, doesn't have the abilities to do for themselves, and even to share in a way that we could be a recipient of. And so I think poverty does that. And one of the things I know the dwelling is doing is kind of challenging that notion we have of homeless persons, people experiencing homelessness as being impoverished in that way. If you look at the overflow shelter that happens on a regular basis on a very flat, kind of one-dimensional level, it looks like poor people receiving services. And if you don't go any deeper than that, you can walk away with, I'm glad I was able to provide that service. What you see as you stay and kind of linger and risk relationship is you start to undo the poverty piece by saying this is a person who has gifts to offer. And so I'm excited to see what the dwelling does, like from a sociological perspective. Like I'm excited to see what the dwelling does as far as challenging that notion in individual lives. But the other thing about poverty is that as a lens is that it is extremely dismissive and simplistic in the way we understand what leads somebody to be in a particular position. And so talking about just homelessness in general as these poor people or these people without a home is like missing the complex nature of what not only leads to that, but the relationship we have to these individuals. So, as we look around at the community that we live in here in Winston, folks are not homeless because they failed to maintain a job or a home or whatever. That may be a piece of the puzzle, but they experience homelessness because of the way we've washed our hands of the issues that can prevent somebody from entering into poverty. So healthcare, for example, the fact that Winston-Salem has gotten rid of all of its jobs that allow for any upward mobility means that people are perpetually stuck in either poverty, like in either low-income situations, or they are stuck in, or they are liberated to be in higher education and higher paying opportunities. We've allowed that. We got rid of things that would have given people a chance to grow into a different future. And family care and education, just all of these things are the factors that lead to it. So it's just really important that whenever we're talking about something like homelessness, that we're not talking about the way we often talk about poverty, which is to flatten everybody into, oh, you're without a house, poor you. But to recognize that we could have made changes. never allowed them to be homeless to begin with. And we didn't because we were missing either the creative solutions to that. We didn't know that we were empowered to do that, or we didn't because we didn't have the economic or political will to do it, or we didn't have the relationships that pulled us out of our own kind of silos. And I think that's something that I think the church is going to have to grow up and deal with, because it is too comfortable with treating homeless persons as the recipient of charity, who are not potentially empowered people who have things to offer, and who are all of our responsibilities as a community. We created the problem. We can fix the problem. We choose all the time not to want to fix the problem. And so we, I want to send this back to Emily, who has like more like kind of connection points for like how we care, but we have to learn to care before our acts of care make any difference. And one of the things we're doing this year is we can't do the overflow as we've always done it, so we're doing this hotel that will be very transformative for some folks that we've gotten casual about and allowed ourselves to not pay attention to, those who are extremely challenging. And I'm excited about this hotel because it's going to force us to rethink who we are as an organization at City with Dwellings, which I always feel like City with Dwellings has a lesson to share with the wider ecumenical community. Who is not at our tables is the question we're having to answer, and we're solving that by saying the people who weren't at the table at all the other overflow shelters because they couldn't casually find their way into the system, we're now intentionally bringing in. We had to learn that as an organization, and I think that practice, those awakenings. This is just a great season for awakenings, and it's a great time to ask who's been missing from our viewpoint and landscape and table and all that. But anyway, Emily knows some great things that are happening, and she's involved in a lot of them. So, Emily, you want to share anything?
Give me some direction on which things.
Well, I'll set you up with this. In addition, and I can talk more about the overflow part and what we're doing this year instead of that, but leading up to it, we have seen just a better understanding of like how housing impacts the ability of folks who want to end their homelessness to do so, and you've had your fingers there, and that's probably just a good place to start, I guess.
Yeah. So, I mean, one of the things that Russ, building off of that, is that our city does not have affordable housing. We are 15,000 units. Is that right? Or is it 16,000, Russ?
15,
yeah. 15,000 units short of having enough affordable housing to meet the need in our city. And so in the end of July, the Dwelling, in partnership with the United Way, we started rehabbing affordable housing in Winston over in the, it's called Northwoods now. It was the Greenway neighborhood. We've done 21 houses over there for folks to transition out of homelessness, which has been amazing. But it really, we can start people in systems, and we can work through the vouchers, and we can get people set up and have housing plans. But if we don't have anywhere for them to go, then it doesn't matter, right? And then you get even deeper into that. And we've had a lot of conversations about these private owners and the accountability of making sure that these homes are livable. How are we bringing these homes back online, right? There was 45 or so neighbor houses down just in the Greenway neighborhood. And then if you go over to Lakeside, there's another 180 units that are down over there. And there are complexes all around our city that have open homes that they need to be brought back to life. So we have the ability to actually start housing and making that change and having affordable housing in our city, but our systems are not set up to do that well. And so that's like, I was there 120 days straight in the Northwoods neighborhood doing this work. One of the things that the Dwelling is really passionate about, by default, I think of my passion, is service learning. And so we had originally intended service learning to look like summer opportunities for young people, young adults, to come and be able to really dig into a week of learning that then acts as service, right? Because I think it's really pointless to just do empty acts of service. But really we shifted our energy, and we had over 250 unique volunteers that came out to help with this project. But it wasn't just they came to swing hammers. Like, we talked about the issues and the systemic things that are going on, but also our community that was living there and our folks that were transitioning to these houses became a part of the solution as well. They started helping in renovations. They started caring about their community in different ways. So I just think that speaks to the power of community and presence as well. But it absolutely, like Russ said, there are things that we can do to help it, so that we don't even have to talk about homelessness to begin with if we were working towards more affordable housing in our city.
Well, that's kind of an interesting idea when because one of the questions I always am considering, I feel like I'm considering, is how do you move, because my work is primarily in supporting faith communities, right? And for a lot of them, making that jump from collecting peanut butter for Sunnyside versus getting out there and trying to really create some change or make a difference or advocate for something to be better, that seems to be a difficult transition, like to move from, and I wonder if the service learning is one way to approach that, because if Moravians like anything, it's to swing a hammer.
I got lots of places to swing hammers for sure.
Yeah, I mean, but that practical sort of, how can I be of service? I mean, that is kind of in our DNA. So, I wonder if, there are ways to pull folks over. I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah.
Let me jump in on. Oh, sorry, Grant. Go ahead.
No, you go.
So I think what's interesting, we're in this federation, this federated relationship with the dwellings, right? So we would be fools to not pause and ask, how did the dwelling get born in the Lutheran church and not in the Moravian church? Why did we have to piggyback into that relationship? And I say that because I know part of the answer. If you look at the organizational structure over in the Evangelical Lutheran Church, you will see housing as a focal point. They are organized around housing to talk about it, to imagine what it takes to end it, and to ultimately build as a denomination to build around it, but even locally to say, what does it look like to build communal life around this issue? And so the dwelling is such an easy thing to do because you're already setting yourself up for that point. Until the Moravian Church Southern Province and Northern Province decides that these kinds of issues are a moral imperative, then that's all you're going to get. You're going to get hammer swingers. It's cool, but you're not going to get down to these important issues that have to matter to the church if they matter to anybody, because they are part of, we just came out of the lectionary, Matthew 25. They're the Matthew 25 people that we want to just volunteer our way to helping instead of systemically dismantling the obstacles and building communal realities that address that. So we don't stand a chance, Ruth, until we look at ourselves from a provincial level and say, this matters to us, and then invest in that future that we have pinned at that point. It's a new watermark, I guess you say. We're not going to let ourselves get casual about this again, and we can start to project a better future in which ideas such as building housing that the dwellings is doing becomes easy to support, rally around, and even fund. But telling somebody, let me send out an email to y'all and see if anybody wants to come and help us like change the system, doesn't work. Now, we who do volunteer organizing and community organizing would say, well, it does work at the right time. And so if we have the energy and the focus, yeah, like we can organize ecumenical groups in the same way we did around the overflow shelter to address these things. But those things shouldn't have to wait for some charismatic personality to pull it together. They should already be bubbling up from the congregations, who should be waiting for, like asking, where we want to talk more about this. How do we talk more about this? Not someone else coming around saying, I'm ready to organize you to do a thing.
One of the things that the North Carolina Synod is doing is, like Russ said, it has been named as a priority of the ELCA, and specifically our North Carolina area. But we have a affordable housing and homelessness task force, which I am one of the co-chairs of. And we've assembled, we're starting to create curriculum and talking points and ways that we can equip conversations in these contexts in churches with Bible studies and sermons that are recorded that pastors can just play on a Sunday if they want to do that, take a break from preaching and yet have a deeply rooted gospel message and liberation, right? And so we're really trying to create these resources so that we can start having those deep conversations that aren't just hammers being swung at walls, but that we can, try to create that change within. And the Lutherans, we definitely don't have it figured out. We got a lot of work to do within our congregations, but we're trying and we're starting and we're trying to, open up conversation that leads to systemic change and not just service.
Right. It seems like it's kind of a both and in some ways, because, I find in the position I'm in a lot of times, just because we're provincial, we get pushback, right? It's like you want this to be a priority. Oh, well, sorry, we have our own little kingdom here that we're going to focus on. And I don't know how to, that's always one of the conundrums, right? Is, how to figure out, because to me, it's part of it is our roots informing what we're, what we're doing. And we never can quite seem to capture that momentum that we need from either like the bubbling up or the, in the hierarchy. I don't know. It's a weird thing.
But what Margaret may want to jump in. I just want to say what we've done hasn't accomplished the goal yet. So it's a good opportunity. It may be a both and, but we've lived in the one, and maybe it's time that we lean into the other way more heavily and see what it looks like to invest into something as a priority, and to see what it looks like to align people and resources and skills and all that around that very matter. In sort of in the same way that we did do that with the Biloxi, Mississippi kind of area for such a long time, coming out of the Board of World Missions Moravian disaster relief. And so there was such an investment in a location. And I think you could take that approach. Obviously, you had staff that did that. You can build staff and communication and stuff to the point that all congregations, like with the Moravian disaster relief out of Katrina, have shared language, shared ways of communicating about their interest in something. Anyway. Hey, Margaret.
Sorry, I told Ruth earlier that I was eating because I just got back, so I didn't want to eat on camera. I was kind of curious, not curious, I was struck by what you said, Russ, about a person with energy and focusing on a mission or whatever. And Emily, I know that I'm friends with the Kukins at Augsburg, so I'm familiar with Augsburg quite a bit because I hang out there some with them. And but I think about our congregation, very small, and the folks that have passion and find something that they have passion about, but also have connections, that help them, do that passion or whatever you want to call it. And so I'm curious, or I'm interested that the Lutherans are all putting together Bible studies, Sunday school classes, whatever, curriculum that might be beneficial to offer to congregations. But, I don't know, I find that we're small denomination Moravians are, but also very weirdly singular churches, so how do you bring in people who might have that interest or be able to, because not everybody has those gifts. I mean, I think that's the other aspect of this is, finding the folks that have the gifts and passion to participate in that. Since we read Eviction in our family book club, and I mean, since then it's just like the housing and that just is such a hand in hand kind of thing, and knowing that during the pandemic, at least in the beginning, and not really following through, but the evictions were hopefully lower than they were or would have been otherwise. But I mean, housing is, I didn't realize it was 15,000 units. That's discouraging, but I knew it was pretty bad. So yeah, I'm just rambling. So
I don't know. I think one of the things that I've seen that's been really powerful, and I guess I can't really speak to just these really like insulated congregations, but with our overflow shelters, the greatest gift that those have provided has been an easy access point to relationship. And I think when you have a relationship and when you can connect a systemic problem to the story of an actual human that you have come to love, that's when it starts stirring within you that you have the ability to advocate for this person that's not just over here, but it's Terry, right? It's Alex. There's a name and a story and a heart that's connected to it. And so I think that that's where we have to figure out the balance of advocacy and relationship and service and how those things complement and build upon each other, because you're not going to have passion to start demanding and calling for change within our systems if you don't have a story that's related to it. And so I think that the gift of City with Dwellings and the dwelling is that it does provide access points for people to enter into relationship that then eventually, like, you have to trust that the Spirit is going to stir that within people that then leads to action in other places, right? And so I think we just continue to create a culture of invitation where people can come and engage and learn and be in these genuine relationships that aren't transactional, they are just relationship. And eventually from there, it does spin and it does start to take root in other ways. And so I'm hopeful that as the world turns again post-COVID, right, that the dwelling will be a place where congregations can come and connect in that faith community as well. And, that our preaching and our liturgy reflects a call to service for this world and for our neighbors as well.
Yeah, if I can piggyback on that, Emily, the Catholic Church has had this two-step that is trusted in the charity and justice two steps, and you got to do both. A lot of my friends out of the Catholic Church don't think that that's a particularly helpful thing, but it kind of reflects a little bit of what I think we're talking about. I think in the Moravian Church, or not, in just dealing with any issue, you really got to deal with it at a communal level. And I think that's a lot of what Emily's talking about. For example, the church has to be willing, has to have prepared itself, had intentional conversations around, are we ready to receive somebody who comes into our space and this is their reality? Maybe the reality is around physical health care, mental health care, homelessness, whatever. Like, those conversations should happen so we're communally able to respond. And then there's missionally, like, I think we missionally want to respond, and that is going out and doing, for sure. The Moravian Church is really pretty good at the missional piece, and I think we're pretty good at the communal piece. I think we have the right songs and the right liturgies for it, and the question is whether we have the real nerve to get down and make it almost at a policy or reality level. But I think we can get there. What we don't have much of any sense of is the political, and that is a key part of how you solve problems. We don't understand that with the eviction thing that you mentioned. You're exactly right. We have not solved the eviction problem. On January 1st, we should expect that thousands of people in Winston-Salem, Forsyth County will be evicted from their homes, and there is no shelter in the city of Winston-Salem for them to go to, period. If that doesn't motivate us to make phone calls, I don't know what does, right? The only thing that would keep us from making phone calls is this notion that I've heard from our province, that is, we don't do those kinds of things. And we should. It is how we respond faithfully to issues that we're called to engage. So we should be learning now, like, you read the book, there should be like, what do we do? And I'm not able to swing a hammer right now, or they're not coming into our church because we're located in this suburb. And those things may be true, but I can still pick up the phone. There was a horrible policy that existed in Forsyth County. We were like the only county in North Carolina that said that when a person gets an eviction notice, they're out in 7 days. Think about how fast of a turnaround that is. You get an eviction notice and the court system wants you out in 7 days. Everyone else has a 30-day turnaround. So all that was needed to do was to say, we should be like everybody else. Nobody wanted to make that call. Nobody wanted to say, I'll call and say we should be like everybody else. We organized a small group of people who made those calls, a very puny group of people. I mean, political power is not in this group. And we now have a 30-day policy in Forsyth County. So it's just, we need to learn that as much as we want to be missional, we have to also be communal, which is what Emily's talking about. And we have to also understand the power of being political and get over our fears of that idea, I think.
Well, and what do you think, what's a good way for folks who have been thinking about these issues and are concerned about them? You know, what's a good way to get started in terms of understanding? Because there's a lot to kind of comprehend in order to figure out where to be the most effective with your work. Where do I start?
You can make a donation. No, I'm just kidding. I don't do that. I think Emily's got some on the ground things, and we always, you know, kind of look for that invitation. But I think there's some soul searching that needs to happen too. And if we need to spark that, Ruth, then I think we need to think about it from you know, this level. Like, how do we spark the soul searching around particular matters? You know, if you look at how we do with racism, you know, our ambition toward being anti-racist has increased, even if our tactics and sophistication in how we approach it has not increased. But that's a start. That's a very important start. So we should look to include these things, whether it's in a leadership focus event or something of the sort that sparks the imagination of people and plants those seeds, as well as, again, the invitation to come and serve that you know, Emily does so well.
I really have nothing to add. I think Russ said that. I mean, we have opportunities to come and serve for people who want the firsthand experience and to see the stories and to see the place, right? But I mean, there has to be that spark of interest, and we're here. And, you know, I think it takes people who are passionate about it, extending an invitation to come and be a part of the story as well. So yeah, lots of invitations and opportunities to come and see, but also, you know, invitation is powerful as well.
Yeah, Ruth, you posted the Dwellings website. Obviously, the City with Dwellings website continues to have updated invitations. So both of those are opportunities or places to find out about opportunities. COVID has not just complicated homelessness. There usually are around 100 people on the street, for example, and there are about 225 people on the street right now. And the main reason for that increase is because people who normally were able to couch surf are not able to do that because folks don't want to risk their own families and home situations. So you've got more displaced folks who are vulnerably housed to begin with. And so we've got, and then the shelters are operating at lower capacities. They're operating around 35 to 40% capacity. So that's another, you know, just imagine the downstream effect of all of these things. The pool at the bottom is massive right now. And the safe ways of serving is limited. So the ability to go out and volunteer directly, one-on-one, firsthand, the things we really pride ourselves in providing opportunities to do with either of these organizations is just not safe to do in the same way. So what we're trying to do more of is to educate. Use this as a year to educate and increase awareness around. City with Dwellings has done a few Roots and Responses events that have been about educating on particular areas such as housing. And we feel like that can increase our capacity even as we're in a year of not being able to increase our volunteer base. And an aware and awakened public, you know, like again with the stuff around anti-racism, holds a lot of power and potential for what we can do in 2021 together, I think.
Anybody have any other questions or any other comments they want to make?
So the two websites obviously would have lists of how one could help. I'm always the person at our church who is on these things because I'm trying to give information out and be connected into whatever's going on. So I'm assuming that those are two good websites where you can find options and or opportunities.
I can tell you that they are because I manage both of them. So yes, yes, there are lots of opportunities and plenty of information on both of those sites for ways you can be involved.
Well, I do know that, our church is doing the linking to the, I think it's probably City with Dwellings wish list because we usually take on some things during Christmas, Advent type things. So so maybe we could work something else in. I'll have to take a look at that website and see whether there's other opportunities we could look at. So, thank you.
Well, and I'll just say the websites out loud because I don't know if the recording, I don't know if we'll have them, I don't know if they'll show up, but it's the dwellingws.org and then citywithdwellings.org. Those are the two that were specific to really the Winston-Salem area particularly. So
looks like we've lost Russ. He's frozen.
He's frozen. He's pondering things.
He is. He looks very, very,
very serious.
Very gone now.
But no, that's fair. This is very helpful information, and I'm surely once we kind of get through this little busy season we're in right now, we can maybe make some little clips of some of this stuff to share with people. And I do think that there are ways. I don't know if I told you this when we met the other day, Emily, but in our weekly e-news, which goes out to about 800 or so Moravians, including all the pastors and church offices, right? We have a section we call our ministry partners from our ministry partners. Right. And so, we're happy to publicize any kind of educational opportunity, volunteer opportunity, need, whatever that is. We're happy to push that information out through our social media channels, particularly.
Great. Thank you.
Just keep that in mind. We don't have a big enough staff to really scan everybody's info, but if you give it to us,
but if we get it to you, you'll get it out.
We're happy to try to do what we can to get it out. And I do think, I with the service learning piece, I was saying, I think I always am like, how can we sneak this in on people? Because you're absolutely right. Like if once there's a relationship, once they know Joe or whoever, once they know somebody, that just changes everything. And to me, Moravians we are so inclined to want to be helpful and in a practical way, right? And so to me, I'm like, I want to get to that.
Yeah. Well, what I think is
right.
Yeah. And what I think is so powerful about service learning is that, how many times have you heard people say like, gosh, I wish there was something I could do. I wish there was something I could do. There is like, it is, especially as we've been doing this affordable housing work, like we are literally creating affordable housing, like homes that have been offline for 15 years now are occupied again. Yeah. Right. And so that would not have existed had we not started digging in 100 plus days ago on those houses. Right. And so you physically can be part of a solution. Right. And so there's all these layers to it, right, that we've talked about, whatever, but this is one where someone's like, I just wish there was something I could do aside from handing out money to whoever's standing on the corner.
Yeah.
There is. This is actually being a part of ending homelessness for one person. And that is a huge deal. Yeah. It's a huge gift.
Well, and I would love to be able to, we've got a lot of, old guys with hammers, and but that love to be helpful in that way, that love a practical project they can be helpful with. And to me, it's just sort of a gateway then for them into, I think that happened with the overflow shelters, right?
Absolutely,
it started out as just come cook a meal, right? Or just give them socks. And then, some folks learned more, built relationships. And the next thing you know, there's a lot more energy for the work and understanding of what needs to happen, right? But it takes time. But I think the same could happen around affordable housing too. And I was going to say, maybe you could write a blog post for us about
Yeah, I'd love to
some
do
of the,
that.
you know, that specific piece, you know, maybe to sort of spark some interest.
Well, and I think like even if you just take Augsburg Lutheran as this perfect case study, you know, I was the youth and outreach minister there for 7 years before I left in March to start the dwelling. And when we started the overflow shelter there was absolutely a group of people that were like, well, I guess you could do it in our building, but we don't want to have to see evidence of it. Right. And we went from you can do it, but we don't want to know it's happening to that same group of people serving a meal monthly, helping with check-in, right? That now that is such an identity piece of that congregation that this year, as we don't have overflow, they're like, what are we doing? Who are we? Right?
Yeah.
Like they're really struggling. And I think that that's for the same with all of the partners, the family groups that have connected in, and not just at Augsburg, it's at St. Tim's, First Pres, New Story, like all of the sites that have hosted this, it has grown into just being central to who they are as a church. And because you showed up, right? And the relationships formed, and there's this weirdness of every season it starts and you're like, oh, who's coming back? Like, I hope my favorite person's back, which is just weird in general because it means that person is still experiencing homelessness. And we don't actually want that for people. But because like that relationship has been planted and has just become so strong, you long for that because you want to be a part of that story and walking with someone in that. So I mean, I think Augsburg is the perfect example of how if you just say yes, and show up, relationship grows and the Spirit moves in that in really profound ways.
Yeah. Right.
So
Definitely. Cool.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for being with us.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for the invitation. I'm sure Russ would say thank you also.
I'm sure he would. In between telling me what I need to do next.
Yeah, absolutely. Or you could be like this guy back here who's just living his best
He's
life.
so relaxed. Oh, having a good nap.
Right?
What would we do without our pets right now, though, for real?
I don't know.
Well, next week is our last office hours. We're going to be talking about MoravianChristmas.org and taking people on a tour of some of the resources that are available. There's a huge amount of music and liturgy already on the site, a lot of family activities and that kind of stuff. So it's already worth a visit. But Mike will be here, Mike Reese, who is the editor of the Moravian magazine and our director of Interprovincial Board of Communication, will be here to talk about that. And then we're going to take a break, at least till the end of the year, with office hours.
Because Ruth is tired of just seeing me on Tuesdays.
I love seeing Margaret. I feel like I've seen you more this year than I've seen you my whole life.
It's very true.
I think it is true. Yeah, well, what a weird year it's been.
It's very
What a
strange.
year.
Well, Emily, it was nice to share screen with you, and
nice to do that with you as well.
yeah, and kind of put more of a face with you, because I know I would do some of the wine and word or whatever Tuesday nights or something with the Cookins, and do a Bible study with Karen on Tuesdays, but I haven't been doing it the last couple of weeks. But anyway, so keep my hand into the Augsburg.
It's a good
little bit
world. I love that place and those people.
So are you doing worship and everything every week?
So we are not. Our first worship was supposed to be Easter, and then we all know how everything happened.
How that worked.
But we are not yet worshiping. We had hoped to do something this last Sunday, but then I got put in quarantine lockdown because I was exposed, and so we had to postpone that. We're hoping to do a Christmas Eve feeding folks and just like a short service, but it just depends. We can't obviously gather in the building in the numbers, and it's this beautiful blessing, and also really challenging. When we gather and when we open, we will have 120 people there. Right. And by default of just being a community of welcome and being open, and like our numbers will never be our problem of having people show up at all. And also this population, social distancing is not in their heads. Masks is like a challenge, like keep your mask on. And so to do it safely is actually really hard. And so it's that balance of there's this eagerness to start, and we want to make sure that we're doing something. And yet we as the church have to be thinking about how to protect our folks, even though it feels like, we should be doing this and we want to do it. And people are like, when's church? When's church? And we're like, I'm so sorry. Like, it's coming when it's safe to do so. And so we will gather for worship every Sunday. I mean, we have our musicians ready. They've put together their liturgy. I mean, we're ready for it. It just hasn't been safe to do it yet.
It's not the time as yet.
Yet. I know it's coming, but just not yet.
Well, great. Well, good luck. Hopefully you'll be out of quarantine soon.
Yeah.
Tomorrow. Woo, tomorrow.
Hey.
Well, thank you again. And it was really nice to see you both. And
Yeah.
if you have questions, let me know.
Sounds good. We'll
All
see you all
right.
later. Have a great Thanksgiving, however
Yes,
you
you also.
celebrate.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.
See ya. Bye.